For any business out there, there's one number that matters more than anything else right at the start. It's not your revenue, it's not even your profit, it's the number that literally separates survival from failure. And in this explainer, we are gonna find that number.
All right, let's put you in the driver's seat for a second. Imagine you've just launched your dream company. The product is amazing, but man, you are burning through cash. What is the one number you absolutely have to know right this second just to make it through the month?
So to get our heads around this, let's meet a company that's wrestling with this exact problem. A little business called Cottage Industries Ltd. They've got a simple, beautiful product and a very big question.
So these folks, they handcraft these incredible baskets. But here's the thing, passion doesn't pay the bills. They are staring down the barrel of the one question every single founder loses sleep over. How many of these things do we actually need to sell just to not go broke? This isn't just a number, you guys. It's their lifeline. So let's figure it out with them.
Okay, before we can find that magic number, we got to do a little detective work. We have to understand where all the money is actually going. But the cool thing is, every single expense a business has, no matter how complicated it seems, can be sorted into one of two very simple buckets.
Okay, so in one bucket, you've got your fixed costs. Just think of these as your time-based costs. The rent on their workshop is a perfect example. They have to pay that same $3,000 every month whether they make one basket or 1,000 baskets. It's fixed. And in the other bucket, you've got your variable costs. These are activity-based. For every single basket they decide to make, they have to buy some materials, right? And they have to pay their workers for their time. So more baskets means more costs. It's as simple as that.
And check this out. You can really see the difference right here. Fixed costs, that's just a flat horizontal line. Doesn't matter how many baskets you crank out, that cost just doesn't move. But look at the variable costs. That line slopes right up, starting from zero. Every single basket adds a little more to that total cost. Getting this difference, honestly, it's the key to everything.
Okay, now for the fun part. We've sorted all the costs into the right buckets, which means we have all the pieces we need to finally find that magic number for Cottage Industries. And this number has a name. It's called the break-even point. It's that exact moment, that one single point, where you stop bleeding money and you finally start making some.
Now to get there, we need to wrap our heads around one really powerful idea. It's called contribution. See, every time you sell a basket, a chunk of that money immediately has to go to pay for the materials and the labor for that specific basket. But whatever's left over, that's the contribution. It's the cash from that one sale that's now free to help contribute to paying off those big, scary fixed costs, like the rent.
And here's the best part. That whole idea of contribution, it gives us this awesome, super simple formula. To find your break-even point, you just take your total fixed costs and you divide them by the contribution you get from selling just one item. That's it. It's that easy. So let's go ahead and plug in the numbers for our basket makers.
All right, let's do this. They sell each basket for $60. The variable costs, the stuff they need for each one, is $12 in materials plus $36 in labor. That's $48 total. So the contribution is the selling price, $60, minus that variable cost of $48, which leaves us with $12. So every basket they sell gives them $12 to put towards their fixed cost, which is that $3,000 rent. So we've got to cover $3,000, $12 at a time.
You do the math, and what do you get? Boom! 250 baskets. That's the number. Cottage Industries has to make and sell exactly 250 baskets a month just to cover their bills. The 251st basket they sell, that's the first dollar of actual profit. They finally have their target.
Now this chart, this is amazing. It basically shows you their entire business on one screen. That red line climbing up, that's their sales revenue. But see the blue line, the total costs? It doesn't start at zero. It starts way up because of those fixed costs. For the first 249 baskets, that blue cost line is higher than the red revenue line. That's the loss zone. But the exact point where they cross, that's our magic number, 250 baskets. Everything to the right of that point, that's the profit zone.
All right, so breaking even is huge. It means you get to open the doors tomorrow. But hey, we're not just in this to survive, are we? We're in it to grow. So let's see how this exact same way of thinking about costs can help Cottage Industries move past just surviving and start making some really smart business decisions.
So, imagine this. The phone rings. It's a new customer, and they want to place a big one-time order for 300 baskets. Awesome, right? Well, there's a catch. They'll only pay $54 a basket, which is, you'll notice, less than their normal $60 price. So at first glance, this kind of feels like a bad deal. What do you think? Should they take it? To figure this out, we need a special kind of mental filter. It's called relevant costing. And the idea is actually really simple. For any specific decision you have to make, the only costs that matter are the ones that are going to change because of that decision. Everything else, it's just noise. You have to ignore it.
So let's run their special order through this little framework. We just need to ask 3 quick questions about any cost involved. 1. Does it relate to our goals, like making money? Yep. 2. Is it a future cost we haven't paid yet? Yes. And here is the absolute most important one. 3. Will this cost only happen if we say yes to this deal? If you get a yes to all 3, then it's a relevant cost. If not, you can completely ignore it for this decision.
So let's try it. What about that $3,000 rent? Well, they have to pay that rent whether they take this deal or not, right? It doesn't change with the decision. So for this specific choice, it's totally irrelevant. The only cost that changes is the $48 variable cost to actually make each extra basket. And since the customer is offering $54, that means they're still making a positive contribution of $6 on every single basket in that order.
So should they take the deal? Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes! By just tuning out that irrelevant fixed cost and focusing only on what actually changes, they can see this deal for what it is. Pure profit. Taking this one order is going to add an extra $1,800 straight to their bottom line. That is the power of thinking this way.
Look, the break-even model is an incredibly powerful tool, but it is just that, a model. And we have to be real here. The real world is always a little bit messier than our nice, clean, simple charts.
You know, our simple model makes a few pretty big assumptions. It assumes your costs and revenues are perfect, straight lines. But in reality, you might get a bulk discount on materials which would change things. It assumes fixed costs are always fixed, but what happens if you get so busy you have to rent a second workshop? Suddenly your rent cost jumps up. And this whole thing gets way more complicated when you're selling lots of different products at different prices.
And this is kind of what that reality can look like. See how the fixed costs aren't one flat line anymore? They step up when they hit a certain number of baskets. And the other lines? They're not perfectly straight. They're curved. This is a much more realistic, but much more complicated picture of how a business actually works.
And this is the main thing I want you to take away. The break-even model, it's not a crystal ball. It is not meant to predict the future with 100% accuracy. Its real power is that it forces you to truly understand the fundamental, almost mechanical relationship between what things cost you, how many you sell, and how much money you make. It's a tool for thinking clearly.
So now we know the number you need for survival. But survival is just the starting line. The break-even point tells you the absolute minimum you have to do. The real question, the much more interesting one, is how do you find the perfect price that takes you from just scraping by to actually thriving? Well, that's a story for another day.
Have you ever wondered how a really great idea actually turns into a successful business? Well, it's not magic, not by a long shot. It's all about having a plan, a really detailed financial plan that guides every single move you make. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the most powerful tools in business, the budget. Okay, let's get right into it.
It really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, you could have the most amazing product, a service that's going to change the world, but if you don't have a clear roadmap from that initial spark of an idea to actually making a profit, well, even the best ideas can just fizzle out. So how do you build that roadmap?
Well, think about it like this. You would never, ever build a house without a detailed blueprint, right? Of course not. And you shouldn't try to build a business without one either. In the business world, that blueprint, that's the budget. It's the thing that takes all your big visions and dreams and translates them into hard numbers, real targets, and actual things you need to do.
Okay, so how exactly does a huge, ambitious goal get boiled down into a practical, day-to-day blueprint that people can actually use? Let's break down that process. The best way to think of it is like a funnel. You're moving from these big, abstract ideas down to something really concrete. So way up at the top, you've got your corporate objectives. That's the big why you're even in business. That then flows into your long-term plan, the what you're going to do over the next 5 years or so. But the budget, man, that's where the rubber meets the road. It's the how. It's the detailed, one-year action plan that makes everything else a reality.
And a good budget is so much more than just a boring spreadsheet for counting your money. It actually forces you to look ahead, to think about the future. It helps coordinate all the different parts of your company so everyone's on the same page rowing in the same direction.
And most importantly, it gives you a benchmark, a measuring stick, to see how you're actually doing compared to the plan.
All right, so we've covered the why. We get it. Budgets are absolutely essential. But what about the how? How does this master plan actually get put together? Let's dig into the nitty-gritty.
So a business has tons of different budgets, right? One for marketing, one for production, one for hiring, the whole shebang. But all of them, every single one, hinges on one critical piece of information. And that keystone, that linchpin, is the sales budget. Answering the question, how much do we really think we're going to sell? Well, that's the first domino that needs to fall.
Now, what's so cool here is you can actually see that domino effect in action. See the sales budget up there? That single number directly tells the production department how much they need to make. And that number tells the purchasing team what raw materials to buy, how many people to have on the line, and so on, all the way down to your final cash position. It's all connected, and it all starts with that sales forecast.
Okay, this all seems pretty complex. So how do you manage it all? You can actually boil it down to 3 main phases: prepare, consolidate, and communicate. First, you prepare. You figure out what might hold you back, your limiting factors, and you draft some initial numbers. Next, you consolidate. You bring all those little pieces together into one big, coherent master budget. And finally, and this is super important, you communicate the plan to everybody so you can start tracking your progress against it.
Now, there isn't just one way to cook this egg. There are 2 main approaches. On one hand, you've got incremental budgeting. This is the quick and dirty method. You just take last year's numbers, tweak them a bit, and you're done. It's fast. But the danger is you might just be carrying forward last year's inefficiencies. On the other hand, you have zero-based budgeting. This is where you start from scratch, from zero, every single year. Every manager has to justify every single dollar. It's incredibly thorough and great for cutting out waste, but as you can imagine, it's a ton of work.
Right, so a budget isn't some dusty document you create once and then file away. No way. It's a living, breathing tool that you use to actively steer the ship. So what does that actually look like in practice? Let's see this thing in action.
This brings us to the idea of control. Now, that word sounds a bit rigid, but all it really means is checking your actual results against your plan, which is the budget, and then making adjustments to get back on track. If you don't have a plan to measure against, you're pretty much just flying blind. Let's look at a real-world example here with a company called Baxter Limited. They budgeted to make a $20,000 profit in May, but when the actual numbers came in, they only made $16,900. Ouch. They missed their target by over $3,000. So the immediate question is, why? What happened?
The answer to that mystery lies in something called a variance. And a variance is just a fancy word for the difference between what you plan to happen and what actually happened. The best way to think about them is as clues in a detective story. If you analyze these variances, you can solve the mystery of why you missed your target.
And here we go. Let's solve this mystery. First, the good news. These are called favorable variances. Turns out they were more efficient with their labor and they got a better price on their sales than they expected. Awesome! That gave them an extra $2,500. But then comes the bad news. The adverse variances. They sold fewer units than they planned and their raw materials cost more. That hit them for $5,600. So you take the good news, subtract the bad news, and boom. That explains the entire shortfall and lands them right at their actual profit.
See how powerful that kind of analysis is? It's incredible. But here's the thing. You can have the most technically perfect, mathematically beautiful budget in the world, and it can still fail if you forget the single most crucial ingredient, the people. So let's look beyond the numbers. For a budget to actually work in the real world, you need a few things. First, everyone has to buy in, from the top floor to the shop floor. Second, responsibilities have to be crystal clear. Everybody needs to know exactly what they're accountable for. And third, and this is so important, the targets have to hit that sweet spot. They need to be challenging enough to motivate people, but not so impossible that everyone just throws their hands up and gives up. And this isn't just a gut feeling. The research is totally clear on this. If you set the bar too low, nobody gets excited. But if you set it impossibly high, it's even worse. Performance actually goes down. The psychology of setting goals is just as important as getting the numbers in your financial model right. So, at the end of the day, it all comes down to this. Behind every single number in that budget, there's a person. Behind every sales target, there's a team. And if you ignore that human element, the motivation, the buy-in, the psychology, then even the most perfect plan on paper will just fall apart. And that really brings us to the end. It doesn't matter if you're running a massive corporation or just working on a personal project. These principles of planning, measuring your progress, and adjusting along the way, they're universal. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. What's the one goal you have right now that could really use a better blueprint?